Alright, what's up guys? My name is Zach, and today I am driving a 1994 Chevy Cavalier Wagon. Up front is a 3.1 liter V6, and down below is a 3-speed automatic transmission. Now, I'm super excited to be driving this Cavalier Wagon for two reasons. First of all, I've only driven one of this generation Cavalier sedan. I've never driven the wagon of this gen. However, I have driven a first generation wagon, which I'll link at the end of this video, so it'll be interesting to compare and contrast those two vehicles. The second reason is that you just don't see these much anymore, and I am all about showing you guys cool and forgotten cars here on the Shooting Cars YouTube channel. But if you would like to submit your own vehicle, you can head on over to my website, zackpradel.com/submit. It's a quick and easy submission form. It takes under a minute to fill out, and I come out to you. But let's get back to that 3.1 liter, not the 3100. This was before the 3100, although it does share a displacement. It makes about 140 horsepower and 185 foot-pounds of torque. I've always liked the 3.1. I think it delivers a good enough amount of power for a smaller vehicle like this, and you could get these with 4 cylinders as well. But the 3.1 was a natural evolution from the 2.8 that came in the first generation Cavaliers. So they just kind of modified it, tweaked it, made it a little bit bigger, and threw it into this. Now, like I said, paired to it is a 3-speed automatic. It's fine. It's doing the job. It's shifting. I've heard mixed reviews of reliability on these 3 speeds. I think it really depends on your use and abuse cases, so nothing new here. Last but not least about the drivetrain, of course, the Cavalier Wagon, and all Cavaliers for that matter, are front-wheel drive. So how does it feel to drive a Cavalier Wagon? Well, drives the same as a regular Cavalier. I wouldn't know that I had a station wagon back on me unless someone told me. That being said, steering is pretty tight, which was pretty characteristic of GMs from this era. I just got out of a Pontiac Grand Am, and it was the same thing. However, visibility is good. This was still before giant, chunky A-pillars, so frontward visibility is quite fantastic, and rearward visibility is wonderful too. Giant, flat piece of glass at the very back makes it very, very easy to see, and I am really enjoying that when driving someone else's car. The 3.1 has a little bit of life to it. It definitely will get you on the jump if you want it to, and that's a nice thing to have in a little car. With that stuff out of the way, let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, I have 5 gauges. Going left to right, we have the speedometer, coolant temperature, fuel, oil pressure, and the tachometer, and of course our odometers down at the bottom. The steering wheel is out of a lot of other GM products of the era, and so it is a well-known, long-time friend at this point, and I don't mind it too much. Off to the left, we do have a speaker, along with a climate vent. And moving on to the door, we have manual mirrors, power locks, and manual windows. Moving into the center, we get 2 more little climate control vents and our Delco radio. I really like the little digital display that it gets. I think that's a really nice touch. And of course, power, tune, bass and treble, all of those little things. Down below that, we do have our heat and AC options. This does have AC. Off to the right of those vents, however, we do have pull-out cup holders, so we will do a big freaking bottle test here in the 94 Cavalier Wagon. However, it fails, first and foremost. But if it didn't have these bristles, it would actually pass, which would have made the 94 Cavalier the oldest vehicle to ever pass the big friggin' bottle test. But unfortunately, because of these bristles, and that's how it came from the factory, it's just slightly too narrow. And so, at the end of the day, the 94 Cavalier fails the big friggin' bottle test, but if there was ever an honorary pass, this would be it. Then we do have our ashtray and cigarette lighter, pretty standard practice there. And then we have the shifter, again, very standard practice, right out of the GM parts bin. It works, it's got a big chunky button on the left, and that's all you need to know. Then we get a center console and the handbrake, nothing too insane there. And then we'll talk about the seats. The seats are very, very 90s, which I personally love. They have a really nice, warm, rich feel to them, and I miss GM seats from this era. Modern GM just doesn't do comfort like they did in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. Look at a GMT 800. I mean, that's a hotel room. You just want to curl up in a ball and sleep for hours in there. So that feeling carries on here too, and I really, really like that. However, speaking of seats, we do have back seats, so let's go do a backseat review. All right, so we're in the back of the Cavalier. I had to break out the coat. It's so cold. But once we are back here, I get an ashtray, but no other amenities. I get lights, but that's pretty much it. What I do get is access to the rear trunk, and we're gonna talk about the trunk and cargo space in a second, but I get a full like 360 view of windows. These windows are huge and very clear because they didn't really have a whole lot of tint back in the 90s. It wasn't as common as it is today, at least. I do have a full video documentary about tint if you're curious, but it wasn't commonplace, especially on a vehicle like this. So big, wide open windows, tons to look around, no headrest back here. 94 still no headrest, which is kind of interesting to see and feel. But otherwise, this is a nice back seat. I fit okay. My knees are hitting the seat in front of me, but that could be adjusted, of course, a little bit by the driver, and I think it'd be a lot more manageable. Let's hop out into the frigid. We'll talk about the trunk and cargo space, and then we'll talk about the looks. All right, around the back of the 94 Cavalier. There we go. Round key for the trunk. Big key for the ignition. Pull this up, and once we are back here, tons and tons of space. Way more space than what you would get in a sedan Cavalier for sure. So very, very cool to see that. I don't get like any crazy amenities, but what I was talking about with the visibility back here, I mean, look at that. You can see the whole world through your Cavalier. Other than that, nothing too crazy. Little spare tire well down there, but that's pretty much it for the wagon Cavalier. Now we gotta talk about the looks, and first of all, I love this turquoise, greenish, bluish color. I love that it's a 94. This is like the most period correct, awesome color I could think of for a vehicle like this, and it's really, really cool to see it in that, and it's cool to just see a second-gen wagon. They were a little bit less popular, but now on the roads, first or second-gen Cavaliers are very hard to come by, and this is the final generation that they offered it in a wagon, and they dropped the manual option for the wagon for this generation, so you couldn't get any of these in manual. However, you could still get the standard Cavalier non-wagon in a manual if you wanted. But overall, I just like looking at this car. I enjoy how clean and simple it is. Like I said, it's an Arizona car, and that was why I wanted to bring it to you today. But let's get on to my final thoughts. Enough blabbering. What do I think driving this Cavalier wagon? Well, I think it's been a peach. It's been comfortable, it's been solid, it's been reliable for the owner, and honestly, I just miss economy cars like this. Because driving this Cavalier, the Cavalier was one of the most affordable cars you could get at the time. It doesn't feel like I was scraping the bottom of the barrel. I wasn't settling for the cheapest car ever. If you wanted an affordable car, you could get a Cavalier and not feel bad about yourself. Now, I'm not saying that the school playground was the best if you got dropped off in a Cavalier. I'm not saying it was crazy wonderful or any rose-colored glasses. But from where I'm sitting, it doesn't feel like Chevy is actively trying to punish me for not spending money. And that's not the case with modern Chevy products. If you get into a base model Chevy Trax, it feels like you were called into the principal's office. But not this. This just feels basic and simple. No, it didn't have the bells and whistles of the Buicks or Cadillacs of the time, of course not. But you know what? If you couldn't swing it that month, you couldn't make the payments, that's all good. Just go get a Cavalier. It'll treat you right. It doesn't beat you up just for wanting a lower payment. And that to me is what speaks volumes from this Cavalier wagon. It's honest, it's true, it's simple, and it's basic, but it works. And it's cool to be driving something like that over 30 years after it was built. This car is still kicking it here in 2024. And that's a very, very nice sight to see. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Huge thank you to Spencer for letting me take out his Chevy Cavalier wagon from 94. He just picked up this car a little bit less than a month ago, so I was so excited to get behind the wheel. Spencer's been a longtime friend of mine. He also runs the GM Front Wheel Drive Facebook page, so if you're on there, I'm sure you know Spencer. Or if you're into GM Front Wheel Drives, I'm sure you'll know Spencer very soon. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.